Welcome to the Real ResQ podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast. This episode of the Real ResQ is being sponsored by Breeze Eastern. They dedicate themselves to our helicopter rescue world. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November of 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and the unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those being rescued has not. Contact them today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. Coming up next in this episode of The Real ResQ, we're joined by a guy who's usually in the background of a search and rescue case in the RCC, the Rescue Coordination Center. This guy is the one that's taking the radio calls, the phone calls. He's picking up that phone to say, launch them, go get them, they need help. Freaking awesome. So in this episode, we talk about a little bit more where not only is it domestic, he's also into the international disaster and response. So he's a coordinator for all of that stuff as well. It's amazing. You guys are going to love this conversation. We had a blast. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Brad Milliken. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real ResQ. Today, I've got a guy who is this really kind of cool for me because I haven't really had anybody on here that does a lot of disaster response management, the whole 9 yards. But we're going to get to that in a second. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brad Milliken, and he is prior U.S. Coast Guard search and rescue guy, and now he's doing disaster management relief internationally. Brad, welcome to the show, dude.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much. This is awesome. Glad to be here,
dude. I'm psyched you're here, man. This is great. And I really mean that. Like, I haven't had anybody on that talks about a lot of disaster management stuff going like broad scheme. A lot of guys have come on here talking about Hurricane Katrina and the disaster relief that was there, other hurricanes, and how assets were moved from this spot to that spot and whatnot. But I'm really excited to hear what how all this works and how you bring stuff to the table. So
yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
It's cool. So I think disaster management, I think, at its most simplest form is trying to answer two questions. So why do bad things happen and what do we do about them? That's super broad.
That is very broad.
Yeah, I think those are some of the most interesting questions happening in the world today. So it's a cool space to work in.
I dig it. I like it a lot. All right. Well, before we get that far, man, I need a little introduction. Give everybody a rundown, like who you are, where you're from, how you got into search and rescue, and then maybe even right into management, like the relief management stuff.
Yeah. So Brad Milliken, originally from outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Went to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. Wanted to get into search and rescue kind of from the time I was in high school. Before we get into the career stuff, I grew up sailing. I grew up racing sailboats. My parents sailed. We were very into it. I grew up living next door to our local sailing club. So there's a story of there was a microburst that came through, and I was probably in middle school, and I remember like my dad and I were in the garage doing stuff that dads and sons do in the garage. And this like microburst hit, and we knew that there were a bunch of boats out in the lake. And my dad and I like ran over to the sailing club, jumped in one of the boats, and we like zoomed out and started like picking people out of the water and flipping boats back over and then making sure everybody was okay. And I remember like, man, this is so fucking cool. Like it was, and so I think, once you get a taste, right? Like that's that was kind of it for, I'm sparking the interest in search and rescue. So, okay, how do you do this? The Coast Guard. Okay, Coast Guard Academy, wanted to go to college. All right, like we'll go do that. First tour in the Coast Guard was on a ship, as kind of everybody's is, and did the
Not
uh,
mine. Not
migrant.
mine.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I was not on a ship, dude.
must be nice, but
It was.
it was good. He was. I mean, I think broadly you could kind of describe my career so far as, either, depending on your perspective, either right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time, kind of in the disaster business. But so we been able to do a couple cool things, and did pretty well in that first tour. Was able to go do whatever I wanted to do. So went and wanted to do sector level search and rescue, and was a search and rescue controller, team leader, SAR planner. Did that for a while I was in the Coast Guard doing the search and rescue coordination stuff. This took us through the 2015, 16, 17 hurricane seasons, which were all real crazy. Got farmed out to a bunch of different responses. That kind of piqued the interest in the broader emergency and disaster management space. While I was still in the Coast Guard, went back to school, got a degree in emergency and disaster management, and from there, left the Coast Guard, worked for an organization called the Pacific Disaster Center. They're based in Maui, in Hawaii. I was in outside of DC, and I did a couple things for them. I think first, I managed their response team for Latin America and the Caribbean. So when we were going to go, respond to a problem, I'd be one of the folks leading the team. When there was nothing to respond to, we would go work with other countries like FEMA equivalents, their national disaster management organizations.
Cool.
And we would do research, basically. We would collect data. We would work with these folks, doing a bunch of different stuff. So the piece of the island was the disaster management analysis. So we would go through and look at how they were assessing why did bad things happen and what are we going to do about them. And there was a manner of, are you doing this correctly? Are these mechanisms you're using effective? Something I thought was really interesting was, when we think about a community's coping capacity, so the things that they're able to do without any government intervention, and then there's the other side, the government intervention piece. So did a lot of work in the Bahamas, and I would say the average Bahamian knows more about hurricanes than most meteorologists, right? So high level of coping capacity.
Totally.
They know what's happening. They know what to do, but it's not because anybody's like instructing them or because they're receiving alerts or anything. Which was, yeah, that was an interesting thing to work on. Was in the Bahamas for Hurricane Dorian, rode out the storm in Nassau in their National Emergency Operations Center, worked alongside the National Emergency Management Agency for that response, and then moved from that role and very response focused, still with PDC, but at the National Guard Bureau, was the emergency management advisor to their chief of operations, and that was like right at the onset of COVID, which was like kind of a wild time, especially because they treated everything as as an emergency management event, effectively as a continuity
Wow,
event. So we kind of got put in the forefront of helping folks make sense of it all. Was in the National Guard Bureau Joint Operations Center through January 6th, which was real crazy.
I'm sure of it.
Yeah. And after the National Guard Bureau, so I did that for about a year, and then I went over to the White House, and I was an emergency management specialist, planning section chief in the White House Operations Center, which, yeah, that's a whole thing. And that was super cool. Had a really good time there. Yeah, really interesting place to work. Did that for a little over a year, and now I'm back in kind of the international disaster management space with a non-governmental organization called Global Support and Development, running our maritime program. So focusing on disaster response, disaster preparedness in the Caribbean.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot. Man, talk about like you mentioned earlier, a very broad area. Wow. Wow, you've gone crazy. This is awesome. Good for you.
But yeah,
Solid.
it's been cool. It's been a ride.
Right on. I dig it. All right. Well, let me bring it back to Coast Guard real quick because
Yeah,
I mean, the real rescue. I got to hear a rescue story. I know you got
sure.
at least one. So,
Yeah. So
so what's your
my
first rescue that you remember?
my first day in the command center, still in trap, sitting next to the search and rescue planner desk, trying to figure out like how it all worked. Uh, and I hadn't met everybody yet, and so the way that the command center was set up is we had like a dedicated search and rescue line that that number is public, and then all of the different 911 call centers that we worked with, they all knew that line. So when that line rang, everybody, you can see which one it is. Everybody picks up and listens, and it's a whole thing. So the line rang, and the guy I was sitting next to was like, "Hey, this is the search and rescue line. This is real." And I was like, "Whoa, all right, like we're doing it." Picked up the phone. Everybody listened. So what had happened was a sailboat had run aground under a bridge, and he like didn't have a radio, didn't have a cell phone, didn't have anything, but he had flares, and he was shooting flares at cars going over the bridge. And so all these folks were calling 911, and they were like, "It's raining balls of fire from the sky." And I remember hearing that and like thinking like, what is happening? What do you mean it's raining balls of fire from the sky? How is this our problem? And yeah, we had the senior chief that was the CDO was like this is fine, we got this, like we're gonna figure it out. And went and checked on the guy, picked him up, and like in terms of like complexity of the rescue, it was very vanilla, but like just starting with like, yeah, so sometimes people like, would I have expected that somebody was shooting flares at cars? Absolutely not. And everybody was like, yeah, man, like this job's crazy. Like, and
Oh
yeah,
my
I
gosh.
I remember calling my wife leaving that day, and I was like, this is exactly where I want to be right now. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I want to be involved in. Like, this
Oh
was
my
to me
gosh.
was so cool.
That's awesome. Now with you in the command center, because there are not too many people. What kind of assets are you sending out? Like
So
to
we
that
had
one in particular.
So that one in particular, we sent one boat. We sent a small boat. I think it was a 45 from a station. Um, so yeah, no helicopter, but I think so. It was sector Hampton Roads, now sector Virginia. So we had a handful of small boat stations. Pretty interesting AOR because we had kind of like the whole Chesapeake Bay, but then also all the offshore coverage.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so the folks who owned most of the offshore coverage were in like the very southern part of our AOR, because the whole eastern shore of Virginia is kind of blocks everybody from accessing the bay. So I think we were usually pretty quick on the trigger to pull air assets in, uh, just because we're not going to send somebody from the south side, like way
Yeah.
north. And then we also had uh, a whole relationship to manage with the Navy, because so in Norfolk, that's where like the training squadrons are. So there's almost always some kind of rotary wing Navy asset that's up training. Like there's probably one up right now. And so there was always kind of this back and forth of like, hey, do you have anybody up? Are they competent? Like, can we use them? And we were yeah, anytime we were able to use some of those Navy assets, we'd like to. uh and it was usually a flip of the coin of if they were stoked to break away from it, whatever training thing they were doing, or if they were like, this training is important, this is national defense. We're like, oh, all right guys. Like um
Uh-huh. Yep, we
it
know.
was
We know.
yeah, man, there's a story there about the difference between the Navy and the Coast Guard and just the number of assets. So so we would use 60s out of Elizabeth City, and it's like
Yep.
they've got you know, fewer than 5 helicopters, right? Like, and maybe hopefully at least two that are that are fixed and operational. And that's not a knock on them. That's just how it rolls. And by comparison, like, on the seawall, Naval Base Norfolk, they've got probably infinite 60s just like that they can conjure. And we had a case where somebody called in a flare, and I was like, hey, I think I saw a flare. And we're like, all right, like, let's call the Navy, let's see if they have anybody up. And they were like, yeah, we've got a 60 that's flying in that area. You want them to do a pass through? It was like, yeah, absolutely, that'd be great, thanks. And then so they did, they cruised through the area. And then we were like, hey, nothing seen. We're like, all right, great, thanks. And we kind of went back to going about our business. And then the 60 called back and said, hey, like, we just refueled, we're heading back out. And I called my wing, and we're spinning up, 3 other helicopters, and we've called in all of the rest of the like on duty folks. We're gonna have, like, potentially 8 helicopters for you in the next 30 minutes. We're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, everybody's like, everybody cool it. This was like a couple days before Thanksgiving too. Like, we definitely pulled people away from like their families. We're like, what are you doing? 8 helicopters? This, sir, we're the Coast Guard. We don't know. We don't get 8 helicopters. That's bananas for like for a
That's
major
amazing.
top player. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it was cool, but
Suddenly I
different.
got a warm and fuzzy. I got backup.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Dang, that's crazy. Now I'm curious. I need another one. What else have you been called? What's weird that comes in?
Oh, man,
Like
there's
something that stands out that's super weird.
people are crazy. I used to keep I mean, I still have it somewhere. I used to keep like a log, like one of those green government logbooks of like all this, like all the crazy stuff that like people would either say on the radio or the stuff that people would like call about. We probably got a call about aliens once a month. Um, and it's
Oh,
just,
that's
it's over
awesome.
the water. That's the Coast Guard. We're like, sure. There are, yeah, a couple people that there was a so in Norfolk, Virginia, when you come across the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, it kind of takes you right by the Navy base. And on the Navy base, they teach sailing, so like little sailboats that go out. And in the summer, I think it's like a week-long course. And so I think every Tuesday morning, they take these like 10 sailboats out with whoever's in their sailing course, and they capsize them, they flip them over, so they can teach everybody how to ride them. And like clockwork, people driving on the bridge, there's 10 boats that just flipped over. I just watched them all flip over. And we're like, okay, like we call the Navy base, like, hey, you guys flipping boats over? They'd be like, yep. I'm like, all right, sick. Everybody good? Like, yep, thanks. But like every single week, we would get somebody, uh,
You know what?
which,
Thank you
yeah,
for not calling us for that.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
throwing that out there. All
right,
right.
yeah, 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 yeah. The So those we had, yeah. Trying to think. Yeah. So there was one that I ended up writing an article about this, and it's not one that I sent you, but there was a woman that called us, and she was like, hey, my husband went surfing this morning, and he's not back yet. He's normally back by now. I think he should be back. He's not answering his phone. And we are like, yep, like, you called the right folks. Thanks for calling us. Do you know where he normally surfs? And she was like, well, we live in Virginia Beach. Sometimes he drives down to Cape Hatteras, and sometimes he drives up to like Assateague. So like,
That's a
sometimes he
very
drives
far to
sometimes he
each
drives
one.
3 hours
Yeah.
south, sometimes he drives 3 hours north. Okay,
Oh my
so
gosh.
effectively the entire coast of North Carolina and Virginia, that's like is our possible area. And like, and you don't know where he went. She's like, yeah, I mean, he never tells me. Like, like, that's like, okay, so somewhere between the southern Outer Banks and Maryland, maybe someone is surfing. Uh, and I ended up writing this article about like, if you're going to surf alone, like I'm a search and rescue planner, and here's all the information that we need to start looking for you. And I kind of broke it down in like a standard text. And I had I had this text in my phone that like when I would go surf by myself, I would like fill it out and I'd send it to my wife. I'm like, going surfing, here's when I'm getting in the water, here's when I'm planning on being out of the water, here's where I parked my car, here's what I'm wearing, here's my board. And like if you don't hear from me by this time, call the Coast Guard at this number and read them this text. And I broke down like here's all the information that like the search and rescue planners need. Here's why it's important that they know where your car is. If we get to the beach and your car's still there and it's locked, like, okay, we're gonna assume you're still in the water. Like, and that was cool. And it got some play in like some like surfing communities and surfing websites, which was kind of neat. But
Nice.
yeah, but that was the worst possible like
That's
yeah
ridiculous.
starting area.
That's I've heard other stories like that where guys go fishing and the wives call back and they're like, "Oh, he's not back yet. He should be back by now." And the first question is, "Well, where does he go fishing?" I don't know. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we've got the entire ocean to look for. Cool.
Yeah, right.
All right. So actually, the guy that told me this story was down in South Africa, and he ended up calling some of his fishing buddies. I was like, all right, where does he normally go? Oh, he usually goes to this one, this one, and this one. Okay, now we've got 3 to
Yeah.
look for. Cool. We've narrowed it down. But
Yeah.
a flow plan, a trail plan, a
Yeah,
hike
exactly.
plan, a plan. Just give somebody a plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dang,
Yeah.
man. You mentioned it right here, and that was that you've actually written quite a few articles, and I'd like to bring a couple of them up if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is super cool to me because you wrote, let's see, well, I'm going to give you the 3 that you wrote me, but 2 of them specifically I want. So this one right here, close and weird encounters at White House Gate and stuff that people come up to. You said you were disaster management for the White House. So
Yeah.
that's kind of funny to me. I am going to skip that one. So everybody, you guys go search on that one on your own. This one though, searching for a beautiful woman. So this is off Scuttlebutt Sailing News. And this is great. I'm going to read a bunch of this. Is you good with that?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, cool. So if I scroll down a little bit, it's going to be in late summer of 2017, a local 911 call center forwarded a distressed call to my team. This wasn't uncommon. We maintain good working relationships with the 911 call centers. When people called 911, the issue that could be more appropriately handled by the Coast Guard than local authorities. The call center would patch the caller through to us and we'd take it over. In this instance, our dedicated search and rescue phone line rang with a caller ID showing county's 911 call center. As a matter of practice, everyone on our team picked up their headsets to listen. As one person would take the lead on the call, someone else would take notes, another would start notifying partners, and the rest of the team would start creating search patterns, preparing broadcasts, running drift simulations, and documenting the situation as well as we all listened. Quote, we have a guy on a sailboat whose girlfriend fell overboard. They're in the river and he's not a sailor. Got it. Thanks. Beep. All right, sir, we've got you on with the Coast Guard. Process engaged, knowing that we are already behind the working against the clock. We were finishing the critical details that would allow us to launch our appropriate assets. Where did the woman fall overboard? When did it happen? Who and what are we looking for? Later on, the caller would explain that his girlfriend, an experienced sailor, had taken him on an evening cruise. It was the first time on a sailboat. While hanging over the side of the boat to adjust some rigging, the wake from a passing ship rocked the boat and caused her to fall overboard. The sails and rudder were locked into place to allow them to cruise, and our caller didn't know how to turn the boat around or what to do. She was not wearing a life jacket. Embarrassed, the caller admitted that They didn't have GPS and didn't know where he was, but he knew the name of the marina that they left from. A rough estimate time is when they left, where the direction they were proceeded in the river. That would have to be good enough. His girlfriend had fallen overboard about 5 minutes prior to the point of the call. Then came the final question to our initial push. Quote, can you give us a description of who we are looking for? What do you mean? He responded. Your girlfriend. Can you give us a physical description? What does she look like? Response. Oh, yeah. She's tall, thin. She's wearing a blue bikini bottoms, a black bikini top, and I'll tell you what, she's fucking beautiful. Just stunning. Oh, she is gorgeous. Dude, I'm going to end it right there because that's just freaking hilarious. This is the stuff that you guys get over the radio before calling us. We don't know any of this.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that was, I mean, that is word for word what he said. And we had said, like, hey, like, we're going to tell people, you know, we explained it, like, we're telling people who to be on the lookout for. So we need to know what she looks like. And yeah, just, oh, she's like, he was just, his tone too is like, she's gorgeous. Like, and there's like, so there's the kind of Coast Guard policy where it's like, you take what people give you and, you know, verbatim, because if I'm making an assumption of like, I think he meant, you know, whatever, there's like potentially some liability there. And I remember, like, so the person running the call, like, put that in it, like, put it in a missile, put it into the system that gets shared with everybody. And so she put, you know, tall, like, wearing, you know, whatever the bikini colors were, and then like, woman is described as like beautiful, comma gorgeous, comma stunning, and sent that out. So like all of our partners received this thing, like, all right, be on the lookout for a beautiful, gorgeous woman. And yeah, like, we all got such a kick out of that. And so we ended up finding her. So she had swam over to like to the shore bank of the river, and we picked her up. And we told her about this too. We were like, hey, like, just so you know, like, we asked your boyfriend, like, for a physical description of you, and he described you this way. He described you as like gorgeous, like, before he told us anything else, you know, beyond that you were like tall, you know. He described you as gorgeous, and she thought it was really funny. And during our debrief, because like, if we have a search and rescue case with a positive result, we want to tear it apart to see like what parts of, you know, the case, where did our decision making, you know, really lead us to the positive result. So we pulled everybody into the call. I'm like running through the script, like, all right, you know, here's the timeline of everything that happened, here's the result. Does anybody want to point to anything that led to this search and rescue case's positive result? And the coxswain from the small boat was like, yeah, that was a very accurate description of the missing person. It was like super accurate. And it was
oh my gosh.
it was good. And yeah, I think I put it in at the end of the article, but like, if I'm ever missing, I hope I'm described as like charming, handsome, you know. Like,
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, it was good.
Oh my gosh. Man, that's hilarious. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, so funny. You
Stuff
know
people
what you
say.
guys get? Yeah, what you guys get in the radio room and over the phone is we actually kind of laugh. So I'm more of the operator. I'm not in the radio room. I don't get those phone calls. I get the next call, flip the alarm, launch them. And at that point, you guys have already filtered out all the BS and gotten us to, hey, here's the coordinates. Here's the beginning of your search pattern. Here's the beginning of search area. And then half the time, you know, you guys send us over land. And even though we're searching the water, we're like, why are we going over land? What is this? Computer generated. I know, but it's annoying. All right.
I've got an aviation story for you. So it was a fishing boat super far offshore that was taken on water, not super rapidly. It's not like the boat was like actively sinking, but they were concerned about it. So we sent a 60 out, and they were going to be outside of comms range. So we put a C-130 up to relay comms. And the 60 was out there kind of watching them, talking them through some stuff. Fuel was an issue, so we're going to send the first 60 back, send the second 60, send the second helicopter out. And we ended up with, maybe a 20 to 30-minute period with no rotary asset above this boat. C-130 still out there cruising around. And we were just following our process, and we asked the C-130, like, hey, can you guys go check on that boat? Like, how are they doing? Everything okay? And the C-130 came back and said, yeah, we're at like 20,000 feet or whatever it was. We're up above the clouds. We have no idea how they're doing. And we asked, like, well, can you go down and check? And they came back and said, like, what what are we cleared to go to? What altitude are we allowed to decrease to? And none of us are aviators. We all looked around the room. We were like, 200 feet? Like, does that does that sound okay? And they came back and they're like, sorry, like 200 question. And we were like, yeah, I don't know. Like, you're the pilot. That's fine for us. And they came back like, fuck yeah, over. And yeah, I think like these guys just like dive bombed this this fishing boat. Maybe saw him for half a second, and then came back up, and they were like, "Yeah, everything looks fine." But yeah, we heard from that, or we heard back from them afterwards. They were like, "We never get to do that." like, thanks so much.
I love how you just cleared him down and you have no idea what you just cleared him to do.
You guys know what you're doing, right? Like,
yeah. Don't hit the water. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, bro, that's hilarious. We're gonna divert real quick to thank our sponsors. Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. All right, let me go to the next one, man. So this next article that you wrote is in, so it's disaster tourists get in the way more often. Oh, sorry, more than they help at the disaster. And this is cool because, and this is like a little bit of your passion right here, is the people showing up to help that have no business showing up to help.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the background to this article is I'd spent about 6 months working in the Bahamas, doing research, collecting data, but had worked really closely with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, which is their FEMA equivalent. And one of the kind of the big things we had worked on is issues relating to Haitian migrants in Abaco. There are a bunch of like shanty towns, a bunch of kind of camps. And it was tricky because NEMA wanted to make sure that all of their warehouses and shelters and stuff could account for everybody that was on the island. But every time that the government went up to Abaco to try to figure out how many Haitians were in the shanty towns, everybody scatters because they're afraid of being deported. They don't really want to be counted. There's some of that goes on. So had been intimately involved with trying to prepare for something like a major hurricane for Abaco. And then Hurricane Dorian remains the strongest hurricane in the Atlantic Basin. So sustained winds of 220 knots, which like in a lifetime of sailing and search and rescue, like that number doesn't mean anything to me. That's like standing on on the wing of an airplane. So I mean, absolutely big time devastation. That's the hurricane that I rode out in the Bahamas. I've got some pictures on my phone of they were sending empty planes to the Bahamas to like evacuate all the tourists. And I took one of them, and I was the only person on the plane flying into the Bahamas, a couple days before a hurricane.
Nice.
I asked the flight attendant, because I was sitting, in 25C or wherever I was in the back of the plane. I was like, can I just sit up at the front? Can I sit in first class? And they were like, you're the only one here. Like, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah. So
for the record, that never happens to me. I can never bump up to first class.
Yeah, right. So was in the Bahamas kind of, from before the storm, and then helped kind of navigate all the incoming international organizations because there was a big influx. And yeah, so that's the background kind of to this piece was ended up doing basically like planning section chief stuff, information and planning, emergency support function. I was the lead for that. So did a lot of briefing all these international groups that were coming in to support the response, leading like the NGO coordination briefs, sharing a lot of the information products and things that were coming through. And yeah, based on kind of what I'm about to talk about, when I was leaving the Bahamas after that response, I was sitting on the plane, like we hadn't even left the Bahamas yet, and just started like rage scribbling kind of the outline to this article. And what had happened was, so the Bahamas are so close to the States, and Nassau, so the capital, was relatively relatively fine from the hurricane. So most of and that's where all the flights to the Bahamas are. So all of the issues for the response were in other islands, but you could still book a flight to Nassau, no problem. So we saw a bunch of folks who came over and like wanted to help, and some of that was legitimate, like they're, and like not trying to smash anybody, but like there were like church groups that came over and were like, hey, we don't know what we're doing, but we want to help. And there's an aspect of that, like we just need some bodies, right? We need people folding blankets, we need folks helping sort stuff. Like there's an aspect of that's super helpful. But then there were the tourists, and there were people who were coming over who just wanted to go see it. And at the time, so Abaco's water infrastructure is supplied exclusively by wells and well fields. Every single well field in Abaco had been overtaken by storm surge. So the entire water infrastructure for the island, population of about 17,000 people, the entire water infrastructure was smoked. And we were talking about, hey, we need to make water or supply water for 17,000 people, and we have kind of an error margin of about a day and a half before we run out of what we were able to put into the tanks. So that was a problem we were dealing with. And then the person that's mentioned in this article, so it was in an NGO brief, and we had talked about, here's our understanding of the unmet medical needs as of present. Here's our understanding of the unmet like telecom needs. Here's our understanding of the water situation. If you are not able to supply and source your own water in Abaco, you're taking it from somebody who is currently, a victim of this hurricane. So, do not go if you are going to drain resources from people who desperately need them.
Yeah.
So we had that talk, and then he was a kid. He was, he was probably in his early 20s, and he came up to me after the brief, and he was like, hey, I need to be on the next flight to Abaco. And I was like, who are you? What do you do? What's your deal? And he was like, yeah, I'm raising awareness about the impact of this hurricane. Like, this event has dominated global news for a week now. Like, that's not the need right now. And he was like, well, I have like a pretty big social media following, and I think they all would be really interested in like what I could do. It's like, you just listen to me talk about how people need medicine, people need medical attention, people need water, and you think I'm going to put space on a barge or a helicopter for you to like go, live stream something? Get the fuck out of here. And I think that what got me so spun up, I think one, he was wearing like a brand new fly fishing vest, and it's like, are you prepared to supply your own shelter? He's like, well, no. It's like, where are you gonna get water from? I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out. No, you're not. Like, you're not ready to do anything other than eat the granola bars that are in your fucking pockets. And what got me so spun up was he kept saying, hey man, like I'm just trying to help. Okay, here are all the things we need help with. We need help with like logistics. We need people at like the port in Nassau moving boxes and like sorting stuff, and like here are the things we need help with. And he was like, well, that's not really what I came here to do. And it's like, that, like, time out. That doesn't matter. What you came here to do is irrelevant. You are not a subject matter expert. You are not here with some certified program that has any kind of credibility. You are here to do what we say is needed. And because what we say is needed is coming from what we're getting from the field.
Yeah.
And it was just that conflict of like, hey man, I'm just trying to do anything I can to help, as long as it's getting me to Abaco to take pictures and video of people who are in their absolute like worst moment. And it's just ridiculous. Yeah, so I felt some kind of way about it. Kind of rage scribbled that article. And the closing is people who say that like, hey, I'm here to help. Like if you mean that, you'll figure it out. And I've no doubt. Like the church groups that came over from South Florida and are like, whatever you need us folding blankets, we'll do it. Like, great. That's like that matters. um if you're just saying, hey, I'm here to help, as a cover to go do whatever it is you want to do, expect no entry to nor quarter from the folks that do this for real. um and that kind of leads to another piece about wanting to help isn't good enough. I
Yeah.
want people to be educated. They're not going to let me be a teacher. I don't want folks to be sick. They're not going to let me be a doctor. Just because you want to rescue people, that's not good enough. You need to you need to do the work beforehand. You need to be a pro at it before we let you do the things that are exciting.
I Dude, that's right on point. There's actually a spot in the article. I gotta find it because I really like the way you wrote this. Oh yeah, right here. Finally, and while not all encompassing, the majority of those who could be called disaster tourists are amateurs in the sense that they are not formally trained in any aspect of disaster response or how to function in post-disaster environment. Those who enter a hazardous situation without understanding what they are really getting into are a liability. The reason search and rescue teams do not conduct operations mid-hurricane is so they can avoid becoming subjects of a search and rescue operation themselves. Poor situational awareness can turn would-be responders into additional victims. It was my favorite paragraph in the entire article. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Like
like if
so
people don't get
simple,
it,
like basic too.
yeah. And like it doesn't matter if you want to help. That doesn't make any of that go away. Uh yeah. And it's like, and it's common. It happens all the time, which is a bummer.
Yeah, it is. That it keeps my job going though. I'm
Yeah.
gonna throw that out there too. All right.
Yeah.
You know, Brad,
Yeah.
I appreciate you being so passionate about that because
Yeah.
there are things that I'm passionate about within the rescue side of things that I do that I embrace, and one of them for me is like going outside the old techniques. Maybe they still work. Maybe that's the best thing, but there are newer, better things that you can do. If you're not trying, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. So
Yeah,
let's
man.
just keep it. But
Well, there's a bit of that too that it's a phrase that like folks that have worked with me have absolutely heard me say it, but uh it comes from the search and rescue world, but it's applied more broadly. But search and rescue is mostly search. And if we knew where everybody was, it would just be called rescue. Like we would just go get people. Um,
right.
and searching is not fun. It is not exciting. It is tedious. It's methodical. It is the feeling of like, I know my keys are here somewhere and I've already looked everywhere and I'm gonna start looking in places I know my keys aren't, just because I need to. Like it's that feeling, but like as a profession, right? uh but if you're not serious about the searching, you're not serious about search and rescue. If you're not serious about the work, you're not serious about any of it. And I think search and rescue, emergency management, disaster response, we attract a bunch of really like high performing, high caliber go getters who want to go do the exciting thing. But when it's time to think about, the complexities involved in getting to the point where we can be effective in a dynamic situation, or when it's time to do the work, to prepare, to train, to get your mind and your body ready to go do the thing, that work sucks in comparison. but you got to do it. And if you're not serious about it, you're not serious about the rest of it. And I don't have any time for you. And that's something I think, it's not just about going out and doing the rescue, because I think how much of your time is spent doing actual rescues versus like being ready to do them.
Oh, it's ridiculous how much time we're spent ready, even training. And then
Yeah,
when we get out on a search mission in general, we've all flown on them, whether it's a flare sighting or the overdue boat, whatever. Hey, I got lost in the woods. Okay,
yeah,
we're doing grid searches. We're doing expanding squares. We're doing ladder searches or parallel searches or whatever. Yeah,
yeah.
hours of flying,
And
hours.
I don't think you get to present yourself as a professional in the space if you're like, yeah, that part sucks. Let me know when you guys find them and I'll take care of the rest. Like that's just not how it works.
Nope.
Uh,
It is kind of funny though. So let me give you an aspect from our side of it
yeah,
because that's hilarious. Is if the alarm goes over and there's like hey, overdue boat off the case, all of us are like, oh
yeah,
gosh,
yeah,
really?
yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes there'll be the new guy will be like, I'll do it. And I just had a guy on here, Gabe Sage. He was like, yeah, I'll take that. Ended up rescuing like 3 guys. So
yeah.
do the work, do the
Right.
search.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I mean that's the I think in like the emergency management side, like response is just such a small piece of the broader puzzle. And so like the things that drive vulnerability or disaster preparedness, like we can work on those problems right now. Like that's we don't have to wait for something bad to happen to anticipate the things that people are going to struggle with. But if you're like, oh nope, I'm just a response person, like that's left of the problem, that's someone else's, like then you're not as prepared for that response as you could be. And I think when it comes time to be the responder, to be the rescuer, uh, there's a I forget the name of the article, but there's a bit about how like emergency management and disaster response is jazz music, and how jazz musicians are some of music's best improvisers. They can step into any kind of song, any tempo, any key, and rip an improvised performance. But how do you get to the point where you can do that? They're not just playing random notes. They're not making random musical decisions. It's through extensive, if not exhaustive, preparation to be able to step into a dynamic environment and do what needs to be done. That's emergency response. That's disaster response. Like the best dynamic decision makers aren't just winging it. Like they're adapting, what their training is, what their preparation had been, because that preparation is extensive. And I know like so the incident command system and NIMS and stuff, like the best rollouts of that I've ever seen, like the best rollouts of NIMS and ICS that I've ever seen have not been strictly adherent to NIMS and ICS because everybody knows how to adapt it to meet the needs of whatever situation we're actually working in. Yeah, disaster response is the same way. It's not just, well, the plan says, next step is to, do whatever. Or if you're, doing a rescue and it's like, well, like we should be doing this, but I really think this situation needs, something else. Uh, Being able to make those kind of adjustments, you don't get a free pass. You don't just get to wing it. Like you get to adjust your training and your preparation based on having trained and prepared extensively. Which I think is like a mental shift that some people like don't really get. You see others that are experienced, that know what they're doing. You see other folks kind of break from the plan or adjust things on the fly. And when you're new, you're like, oh, we just don't care about the plan. All right, like I can do whatever I want. Like, absolutely not. That's not how it works.
No, stick to the plan.
Yeah, yeah. But I always like that because when you're trying to get people kind of excited about, you know, being a emergency management, disaster response, rescue decision maker, when you say like, yeah, it's jazz music, people are always kind of like, what? But I love that analogy.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing with us once we get in the field. This is great. I love this conversation just because we live the same world, but on totally different sides of the radio. So for me, it's okay. You guys give us a grid search or a ladder search, and all of a sudden it goes 20 miles inland. Well, we're not going to do that. So we'll hit the coast, and then we'll turn around and come back and say, hey guys, we're not doing that. There's no way he climbed up the mountain to get this far in. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. But that's stuff that we're making calls on scene, reporting back to you saying, hey, we're going to alter this a little bit because of this and this. Roger.
Simple. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, we don't have to listen to them. It's like, no, we're making an informed decision based on the situation that we're in. And that's how it works. It's teamwork, baby.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's like
awesome.
Yeah. And I think like if there's something that like I've kind of taken through from search and rescue into like disaster response, it's that bit of like, yeah, like I don't have all the information, but like it's time to make a decision anyway. The whole bit of like analysis paralysis, and you'll get folks in the emergency management and disaster response space that they'll want to wait until they have all of the information. And that's just not the world that like I kind of cut my teeth in, where like, hey, I've got my search and rescue checklist, but they stopped answering the radio, and I didn't get to fill out my whole checklist, but that's what we got. Like we're going with the information that we have. It was a line from search and rescue school of, we sometimes make decisions with 100% consequence based on 50% information, but that's what it is. That's the job. Which is like for folks who I think come into either international development, relief, disaster management, perhaps more traditionally than kind of crossing over from search and rescue. Like that's a situation that makes people uncomfortable. Of I need to make a decision and I don't have enough information. And if there's anything that I've seen, people with search and rescue backgrounds really succeed in, and then broader disaster management space, it's hey, here's the information I have, and here's what I think good enough looks like. It's not perfect. Here's all the information I'd like to have, but this is what I'm comfortable moving forward with this based on what I currently understand. Because that's just how it works.
And then we start the rotor head. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Brad. So now let me ask this, dude, because this is awesome. But you've been doing this for a long time. So what advice would you give to those that are doing it right now, that are just coming in? What are things that you've learned that you'd be like, yeah, don't do that, or yeah, do that?
Yeah. So stealing this quote from a mentor of mine, a guy named Tim Manning. But nobody in this field, in emergency management or disaster response, nobody in this field is too important for you. If someone is going to give you, you are always allowed to ask for a moment of someone's time and attention, and if they choose to give it to you, be gracious, don't waste it. And the flip side is you will never be too important for anybody in this field. If nobody owes you a moment of their time or attention, if they choose to give it to you, be gracious, don't waste it. And I found that to be true. Kind of cold calling people when I was looking at getting out of the Coast Guard and kind of broadening, hey, I think I understand this search and rescue piece, but I know that there's kind of this whole world of emergency management out there. I would hit people up on LinkedIn. I would like ask people, hey, do you know anybody that's doing emergency management? And I had kind of this line about like, I think you're doing what I want to be doing. How do I get there? I don't think I ever had a single person be like, I'm not going to talk to you. Like, I think everybody I asked gave me time and gave me good advice and kind of told me their story. And through like pretty senior government folks, and I reach out to people, find people who are doing what you want to be doing, and hit them up. And I think that applies perhaps more so to people who are already in the field than folks who are looking to get into it, because the emergency management and disaster management field behaves less like a single field and more kind of like a federation of like loosely aligned fields. Like if you're doing hazard mitigation and working with insurance companies and people that write building codes, like you are in a very different part of emergency management than like the stuff that you're doing or the stuff that I'm doing. um, so like the field is immense, and it's broad and it's got a bunch of really cool people in it. So talk to them. I think that's probably the biggest piece.
And then another question is going to be how, like, or so me, how would I get into what you're doing?
Yeah. So there's no like golden path for emergency management,
Of course there
and
isn't. Why would there be?
yeah, there's like not really. I mean, I think the kind of like cheeky answer is like you just do it. You start like applying to emergency management jobs and see how it goes. But I think the one of the things that like I spent a lot of time kind of talking about and thinking about with folks who are in the field. So I went back to, for me it started with going back to school. I got a master's degree in emergency and disaster management. And that was not because there's a requirement. Like I don't think there's a single job that I became, that I wasn't qualified for, that got a master's degree, was again qualified for. Um, so it wasn't about checking the box. It was really about spending time getting into the weeds of the problem set. And that was super valuable for me. And I think like anything, that those opportunities are what you make them. And I felt like I had a duty to make the most out of it. And I think I'm in a present place now. Like there's not a single job that is presently inaccessible to me that like if I went out and got a doctorate or a PhD, that would suddenly come on the table, especially like operational jobs. But currently thinking about going back to school because I want to spend time getting into the weeds of the problem set. So there's this debate in the emergency and disaster management space about who takes precedence, the operational folks or the academic folks. And the piece that nobody likes to acknowledge is like it's both. Like the people that have a foot in both worlds are the ones that everybody wants to hire, wants to work with, wants to to have on the line, to have in the trenches when it's time to go do the shit. And you can have a PhD in social disruption with a focus in emergency management, but if you've never done anything, what good is all that knowledge doing? Similarly, you could have been a fire chief, police chief, emergency manager, whatever for 30 plus years, but if you don't know why we're doing things a certain way,
Yeah.
what are you doing other than treading water? Why are we not advancing? We need to understand how things are changing. I mean, I think everything in the field has shifted post COVID. We should take all of our books, all our manuals, everything. Like everything should have an asterisk that was written pre-COVID because we've learned so much and need to adapt everything. So if you can be operational, I that's where we actually do stuff. But if you're not trying to understand why we do stuff, you know, you're holding a spot that somebody who understands it better, could be moving into. So the answer is both. You need to understand what we're doing, and you need to know how to apply that understanding.
Right on.
And however you get there, there's not like
Howard,
yeah. However you get there is valid.
Howard, just start calling people. LinkedIn. What else do you say? You
Yeah.
just call everybody.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. That worked for me. When I was
great.
looking at getting out of the Coast Guard, oh man, I called so many people. Because my wife's in the Navy, she was deployed, and I had like started looking at, do I want to stay in the Coast Guard? Do I want to do other things? And like I had this kind of like I had the free time, and I had like if I was at all interested in something, I was like trying to call people about it, talk to people about it, shadow somebody. And that was a really positive experience for me. Uh, one, because like I got to learn a bunch of really cool stuff, but two, I feel like I got to see how easy it is for people to like try to take you under their wing and like that was potentially more impactful than like the stuff that I was learning or doing.
Right on. Nice, man. Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
And here you are.
And here we
Getting
are.
ready
Yeah.
to move down back to Charlotte to like do
Yeah.
this whole thing. There. I love it, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Brad, this has been an absolute treat for me. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me. Just giving us the like the inside scoop of the behind the scenes stuff that you guys do. It's awesome. So thank you.
yeah. Thanks for having me on. This is really fun. This is cool. I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. No, it's good. No, you know, I get guys like you that come on and tell your stories, and then that's why everybody listens. It's not me, it's you. Hey,
Yeah,
I'll tell
cool.
you what. The next time I get back to Charlotte, if you're there, maybe we go sailing. Hit
Yeah.
Lake Norman up. I'm just saying.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
buddy. I'm in.
Yeah.
You might teach me a thing or two. All right. I'm good with this. I'm really, really good with this.
Yeah. Sounds good,
Awesome.
man.
Thanks, brother. Before we log off, I wanted to go over something just a little bit more in detail from our conversation with Brad. Love the fact that he came on to drop us some mega knowledge on what they do in the operations center and the call center and getting us all deployed. Well, I wanted to back that up a little bit. So I did a little research online, and Brad sent me a little bit of information, which I'm going to show to you guys right here, and we're going to talk about it. So the people that are in the watch standing office and the ones that are taking the call, they have a lot of information they're trying to get, and they're trying to maximize that information for all of us that are going out on the operational side to go get those in distress. Okay. So with that said, one of the things that comes in is SAW reports. So they're trying to get as much information as they can. Radio calls, frequencies, types of communications that we have with people. In the initial SAR checklist that maybe the U.S. Coast Guard might use is position. What is the last known position of the people? A lat long, a geographical reference. How many people? The number of people on board, adults, children, total. The nature of the distress. What is actually going on? What's wrong? And then a description of the vessel, of the raft, of the board, like Brad talked about. Anything that we can get to get us out to you. Make, model, color. What are you wearing? How are we going to be able to see you? Is there an EPIRB going off? All these questions are going to come up. And the more information that we can get from everybody out there, the better. So there's another one where they talk about a medevac 9 line. We use that all the time for when a medical case comes up and we have to go get somebody. Again, location. Where are you? How are we communicating? Number of patients. How critical are they? What kind of emergency are we coming out to? Special requirements. What are we going to need? All right. There are a lot of things that we're trying to do. In addition to that, I'm going to talk about one more thing, which is help us help you. You help us, we help you. The more information we have, the better. So where is your starting point? Where is your destination? Intended travel route? Where are you going? And do you have any other plans that are in between? Other things that pop up might be level of experience. Are you an expert, or are you just an average person that's going out hiking the first, second, third time ever? Right? What do you have on you? What do you have with you? Do you have water, food, matches, flashlight, whistle, cell phone, etc.? Do us a favor and alert somebody. Let them know your float plan, which is going out in a vessel and you're going to give a trip where you're going and where you're coming back from, or a hike plan, hiking out and coming back. This is where I'm entering the trail. This is where I'm hiking out. This is where I'm coming back. Always in a timeline. We're looking for a timeline because we need to know like how long you've been out, how long you're going to be out, and when you're going to be back. This all comes into play when it comes to the Search and Rescue Coordination Center. And then when they give us the information as operators, we're going out to start at that first known or the last known location, and then we're going to start our search from there. So I hope this helped you guys. I wish you guys all the best. Get out there, be safe. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Go. Now it's time for me to pull chocks and take off. But before I go, I'm always looking for the memorable rescues that people have done. If you have one that you're willing to share or know somebody who has a story, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to highlight it here at the Real ResQ. For everybody that is standing by for that SAR alarm, remember, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. So until next time, fly safe and swim hard. Thank you for joining me today here at the Real ResQ podcast, powered by Vertical Helicast. We'd also like to say thank you to our sponsors for this episode, Breeze Eastern. They dedicate themselves to our helicopter rescue world. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November of 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and the unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those being rescued has not. Contact them today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. Hey, reminder. Rule number 1, don't be effing lazy.